Good evening, everybody. I hope that you can hear me and that you are well. Tonight, we're talking beetroot growing and a bit about the agro processing of this crop as well. My name is Dawn Numdu. I am your host for this evening, and I'm so happy that you were able to join us. I'm going to start with Khotelo. Just a bit about yourself. You've been on this platform before. Maybe just more about your farming business and what got you into this industry.
Good evening, everyone. My journey started in 2016. My dad was the big farmer, but he never wanted me as a girl child to farm. So I went out to do what I needed to do, study. And as I meet people, I think it was God's designed path for me to find myself into farming, because that's basically I grew up in a village where I used to go with my brother to get the sheep, to take food to my dad and my brother at the fields, during school holidays. Basically, I was a farmer, that I never practiced farming. In 2016, I met a few ladies who were actually doing agro-processing, but they were doing maize processing, where they were doing meal, cornflakes, and all those things. That's where the interest started to grow. From there, I started researching about maize agro-processing, because that's where I thought I would get my hands dirty with. As my dad was a grain farmer, he was planting maize. So I wanted to process the maize that he was planting. So as the journey continued, I was doing it from a distance, as the farm was in Lichtenberg, and by then I was staying in Bloemfontein. So I never thought I would do cash crops, because my dad was doing grains. So that is what I thought I would do. But the area I found myself around Brits, Hartbeespoort, they're doing a lot of cash crops. That's where now I also started exploring the cash crops on the soil that I found around here, around Hartbees, where I am staying now. And basically my business now is about a lot of your cash crops and your poultry. And it's called watered seed, because I'm a seed that was watered, because my dad was the farmer, and then I became the seed of the grains.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks so much for being here and sharing a little bit about your story and where you started and what you're currently doing within the agricultural space. I also have Kia here. Kia, would you just maybe like to tell people more about you, what you do in the agricultural space, but maybe just an introduction if you're able to.
Thank you, Dawn. Hello, everyone. My name is Ketlechile Mguni, and I am a farmer and an agro-processor. I process fresh products, specifically herbs, chilies, and garlic, and make gourmet products out of them, ranging from your flavored salts, your flavored butters, as well as traditional international sauces. Besides that, I am also the African Farmers Association National Youth Chairperson. So we advocate for young farmers. We identify their challenges in different parts of the country, and develop tailor-made programs for them to speak to the challenges that they have and to assist them to graduate from the different levels of production, with the aim of our FASA being to commercialize Black farmers in South Africa.
Thanks, Kia. You're an accidental speaker tonight. I'm so happy to have you here and to have you join us. Thank you so much. I had a whole list of people who were supposed to be joining us, and I hope that they still come through. But I'm going to ask my questions to KG, and then hopefully if you're able to cover most of the topic, then I'm very happy for that. I know that you said that you do this as a rotational crop, if I understand that correctly. Hopefully my other guests will also come through. Devrol from Devrol Scenery Farm. I also invited Ludwe Majiza from Unikaya Permaculture. So I'm hoping they do come through and that the network actually allows them to connect. But maybe as a start, let me go to Kia. Kia, I don't know if you specifically produce this crop, but I think there's a lot of creativity that goes into the agro-processing of beetroot. One of my speakers was going to come on, specifically Edward Jaroso. He does amazing things with juices and yogurts. So I think there's a lot of added value down the agricultural value chains that is often overlooked, and people kind of just stay in primary agriculture. What is your take on that, Kia?
The agro-processing sector is very vast, and it's all up to the processor, or rather the producer, what it is that they would like to do, especially on the creativity side. I mean, now we're talking about food. We speak about agro-processing, but mostly to add value to your produce, which is great, because as you plant beetroot, you harvest it, and sometimes you do find the bunches that are not meeting the grade of the market. So therefore, you can use that to process other things. For example, you were using powders. There are powders using beetroot, but also not just that, but the second grade of agro-processing, meaning just adding value by packaging it, slicing, packaging it, or grating it so that it is easier for the customer to use.
I do see my other speaker, Devrol, is here from Devrol Scenery Farm. And then I'm going to open it up to the floor just to maybe talk about whether you guys are farmers yourselves and if you farm with this crop either as a rotational crop, because as I understand it, it is a good rotational crop. You can plant it with legumes. It can be planted with onions in rotation. So there's a lot that can be done with beetroot. In my own home garden, planted as well beetroot. So I think there's a lot that can be done. So Devrol, you've been on this space before. You spoke to us last time about spring onions, and I think it was you and Andile Matukane, you stole the show. You're back again, and this time talking about beetroots. Maybe just firstly introduce yourself, people who might not know you, where you farm, where you're based, and what drew you to the agricultural space.
Hi everyone, my name is Devrol and I actually farm in Bronkhorstspruit, Noordgedacht. I am a vegetable farmer. So with beetroot, it's actually one of the vegetables that I farm for crop rotation. So usually it's during winter time, hardly ever in the summers because of my speciality and the vegetables that I do plant, which is spring onions, which is your corianders and your parsley, and also spinach and sweet peppers. Beetroot is something that eventually helps me with my soil, and I am very, very happy to be back on the Twitter space and obviously wanting to guide as possible where I can.
And I think you've answered the first question that I was going to ask our speakers tonight. What has your experience been like growing this crop and how you produce it? And you've answered that beautifully. Maybe we can focus more on the best cultivars. Experts say that although beetroot is a cool weather crop, like you said, you plant it when the weather is cooler in the wintertime, using hybrid cultivars intended for summer production offers many advantages. What do you advise? And I see Dodo's also requested the mic. I'm hoping that that means that you also produce this crop and you can also give insights. But maybe Devrol, just in terms of the cultivars that you produce in wintertime and if you've had any experience doing it in the summer at all.
My cultivars that I usually plant, there are two. So I buy my cultivars from Stark Ayers, and the first one is the Detroit Beetroot, and the other one is the Star 1105. The red dark one that I usually use quite a lot is because the fact that it's high yield, and even if you do plant it right from straight from the ground or you're doing seedlings for yourself, I do recommend the red Atlas as well as the dark red Detroit beetroot. Very fun. I don't have any problems actually planting them in the winter because then the insecticides, I hardly have any problems with that. Especially the Star 1105, especially hybrid, and you never get disappointment whether you're planting it from ground and planting your own seedlings. So quite a lot of times when I do plant it during the winter time, I make sure that obviously I plant it before or after, in between May and April, but never after May because then it really needs its sun to germinate properly and have obviously when you transplant it, doesn't even if you do transplant it, it doesn't really have much of an effect whether it will die or not as long as you are really on time. So one time when I was actually late, it was in late June, but the germination was quite a little bit of a problem because then it was a bit colder. So the germination took a bit longer, and so the harvest as well did take. It was not such a good. It was not really a good harvest because I was really late. Even though it does grow very well in the winter time, but it's just a matter of the germination, which is very important stage of any growing seed or seedling in your garden. So that was the only time where I faced a young problem was that I was late. And so the germination really did take time to germinate really well. And so for the transplanting, it was very well, but it was not as good because then the harvest was later and everything just was not so good. So I think that's basically much of that. The red Atlas, the best one, and the dark Detroit from Stock Ayers.
Thanks, Devrol. I think you're advertising here, which is fine. I think farmers are also very specific. They want to know where did you buy your seed. So So I think it works. Thanks for that. Guys, Edward Jaroso, the guy that I was talking about earlier, just messaged me to say that he's rushing home so that he can join the space. And I really want to get his take on more of the agro-processing bits where he's focused predominantly. So hopefully he gets to be here before 7 o'clock. KG, what about, soil requirements for this crop? What is the best soil type? And can we, focus more on how to prepare the soil? Because as I understand it, beetroot thrives in deep, rich, sandy loam. And so maybe you can just talk about your understanding and your experience with this specific crop.
Hi, John. Yeah, my network is so bad. The soil preparation, but with my soil, because I've got a mixture of soil, which becomes hard to, and I need to do more of softening my soil. It gets hard because a lot of where I planted my seeds, I needed to put a lot of work in softening and making sure that the soil has all the nutrients that were needed on the soil. I also have a high pH on my soil. First, when I started planting beetroot, I was just planting. I didn't know much about pHs and everything else until I started now working on the soil. And already planted the bit, and it became big and dry without more of the minerals.
Okay, I think she was really trying to share as much information about this crop, but as you mentioned, okay, there she's back. Maybe I'll go to Devrol for this one as well. I think Devrol, she made a point about focusing on her pH. Research also shows that it needs to be between 6 and 6.5. Do you do soil testing as well? And how important is that, especially when it comes to growing beetroots and specifically with your soil preparation?
It's very important for the pH, but what I think it's very important, especially for a very root crop like beetroot, soil preparation is very important because the roots really do go down. So in soil preparation, I think the most important factor that I always say that when you put in your, even if your lawn is really good, but the preparation of this or the latest technology where you have granulars, where you broadcast your fertilizer, the 2-3-2-4-6-22, which is very good for pre-planting beetroot. I can't say that it's a very needy crop, but then you do need a lot of soil coverage on your beetroot, and for it to actually to be a bulb, the preparation or the pre-planting with the pH balance as well as the land and the soil pH, which is very important because of the root and creating a bulb. It really needs a lot of soil coverage, and the prep, it's more like your onions because of the root really does go really shallow and you really need a good harvest. But the pre-plant of the fertilizer 2-4-6-22 also plays a big role in a produce like a beetroot. So the pH, yes, it does, but not as much.
Thanks, Devrol. I want to do a few last questions just around germination and then also pest and diseases. And then hopefully we get some of our agro processors to come through and answer some of my other questions about it. Kia, I see you unmuting your mic. Did you want to maybe say something?
I just wanted to say that being in the agro-processing sector, it's very important, to focus on, especially for the emerging markets. That's a very good focus when it comes to agro-processing, but more specifically on beetroot. There are many trends at this very moment of whole foods, superfoods that are taking place currently. So it's very important that when you are focusing on such a crop of beetroot, the creativity needs to really take place and also to gain, a specific market.
Duncan, you click the mic. Duncan is, of course, the head of news at Food for Mzansi. The floor is yours.
Devrol is the beetroot grower, right? I was just wondering in terms of, climate. Usually beetroot is grown during the cooler seasons in warm areas, right? And we're just thinking about, how climate change obviously has impacted how, when we grow, when we plant, what cultivars we are planting. And I was just thinking in terms of beetroot production specifically, how has the changing weather patterns changed how farmers, when they plant beetroots, when they yield? Maybe Devrol can give us some insights into that because, South Africa is getting hotter and hotter and farmers are constantly having to find ways to navigate around that. How is it impacting production and yield on the farm, and also for new farmers that are getting into the space, focusing on beetroot production? What advice and tips do you perhaps have for those farmers?
Thanks, Duncan. Devrol, the floor is yours.
I believe in a star 105 stock heirs. So it never ever had to disappoint me whether I was planting it from the ground or I was creating my own seedlings. So with germination with the climate change, I mean, it's been brutal, I must say, especially until harvest time. Because right now we planted ground and we planted seedlings from our own. When I eventually saw the difference, because the one was in the seedling trays, the seedlings that I created with the star 1105, it was okay because I took care of it in the nursery. With the one I planted on the ground, with everything preparations, everything was 100%. But now the issue came with the hotter summer and the balance was just not right. And now that I'm seeing the difference between the seedlings and the ones that are planted on the ground, it's just something else. I don't even know how to explain because now a big challenge. Seeing that maybe perhaps my harvest will not be as good as the ones on the seedling trays, obviously that I created. So with the climate change and it being hotter, you can actually see from the leaves that they really are struggling because we are on open field, especially for the vegetables, beetroot. It is so difficult to see, even if I can put in as much as fertilizer, but you don't want to be so you don't want to put so much because obviously the fertilizer will eat it up. And then, however, it's cooler in at my place, not Kedah. I could say it gets cooler at 7 o'clock, but once it gets to 10 o'clock, for some reason it gets hot. And always when you try to mitigate pesticides and insecticides, for some reason you always have to keep other ways to make your produce look really good. But I must say that the difference I can see, the hotness, it does make a very big difference when I harvested in May and when I'm going to harvest now. It's just the ones that I'm going to be harvesting now, it's going to be a disaster. I can actually tell because once I took out one of the lines on the plants, it was actually a very small bulb. Obviously, I'm losing money on what am I going to do with that beetroot that is as small as a spring onion because it really needs to create a big bulb like onions. And right now, it's just causing, I don't even know what to say, Duncan, because climate change really does affect us horribly. And there's no other way to make a difference. But I can actually say that once you get the irrigation right, especially for hot days and open fields, if you have irrigation that is sprinklers and you have drippers, say water drippers, but when it gets really, really hot, then you know you can cool your beetroot with sprinklers. But climate change has got it all. Star 1105 is the one that has never disappointed me, but because of climate change, I see a huge difference.
That's sad, Devrol, and I hope that maybe you can try something different when you do harvest further down the line in terms of agro-processing, either of the leaves or using the smaller bulbs to process and sell separately. I do see Edward Jaros is here. Edward, Eddie, I see you on the Twitter space. Please do request to speak. Grab the mic and I'll give you the floor. KG, you wanted to also contribute. Also see Bridget also clicked the mic, and I also want to give her a chance to speak. But KG, first you.
On climate change, I just wanted to add on what Deborah has said, because my yield now for this past harvest, it took a bit longer because I had to leave it until a bit of the coldness of winter, and I harvested the best beetroot ever. But now I'm worried with this now new season because now I have to water the seedlings like twice in a day, in the mornings and in the evenings, because it is really hot. The soil gets so dry after watering in the morning. So I try to water twice. So we'll see now this coming season how best the yield will be. But the previous yield that I harvested in August was a bit well because of the coldness of winter. But climate change is really affecting us drastically, especially for me. I'm on the Highveld. It's too hot here in Hartebees. So far, we haven't had rain even. So I'm hoping for the best.
Thanks so much. Duncan wants to ask one more question to you, KG. So Duncan, you can do that.
I'm going to be quick, I promise. So you mentioned that you now water twice a day. So before, did you only water once a day? Is it due to climate change that you increased the amount of times that you water?
Because of climate change, Duncan, because it's too hot during the day. I used to water only once a day between mid-mornings. That's when I would water my garden. But now since it's so hot, I water early in the mornings around 8 and also in the evening around 5, 6 when the sun is now setting, so that at least at night there's still that moist in the garden.
Thanks, KG. Bridget, the floor is yours. Your contribution, maybe just an introduction to who you are and what you do in agriculture.
Thank you so much, Dawn. I'm a farmer based in Limpopo. We specialize in tomato. But I have a question for Devrol. I think she answered part of it. I wanted to find out from her, like, which one is the best method between planting directly and growing seedlings. I think she answered part of it. And then with the seedlings, after how many weeks is it suitable to be transplanted?
Okay, thanks, Bridget. Devrol, would you like to respond to this question, please?
When you are late, if you can see that you're going to be very late with your planting, rather do your seedlings so that the transplanting it's much more better and your yield would actually increase when you're doing your seedlings. So with me, I would really advise that when you can see that you're late, do your seedlings whilst you're doing preparations on the one side before you do your transplant. But if you're earlier, then you're also on a good side to do from the ground. Which seed do you use? I dark red Detroit or the star 1105. So which one do you use for your seedlings? Definitely the star 1105 for your seedlings and for both. When you are planting in your seedling trays, when you buy a non-GMO seed, then you know that you'll be able to transplant your seedlings within 2.5 weeks, then you'll be good to transplant.
Thanks, Devrol. Thanks so much for that info. Edward, you are here. Thank you so much for coming to the space. Maybe just an introduction for those who might not know you. You have the floor. I'm so happy you could make it.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carlos Edward from the company called Carlos Pty Ltd, based in Limpopo, Polokwane. What we do at Carlos, we produce our very own unique yogurt using the sweet potatoes as the main ingredient, so to say. Actually, I'm not a farmer, but agro-processor. While we're busy talking, even though I'm late, I'm grabbing new ideas on what best can I produce out of this beetroot. So in my mind already, I'm thinking of, okay, somehow I can make a beetroot flour, the beetroot chips, the beetroot this and that. So I'm generating some few products, what I can do out of this beetroot to a point whereby, okay, I'm just listening to everyone, then I know at the end of the day, I'm going to produce something out of this.
Thanks so much, Edward. I think you're very creative, even just using sweet potato to make yogurt. And I think when I invite you back next, I would like to taste some beetroot yogurt from you. So thank you so much. Okay, we have a few minutes left. I did want to focus more on the pests and diseases, maybe pest and disease management. I think Devrol was speaking about it's a little bit easier to manage during the winter time. But what happens if you're planting in the summer season? What should you be aware of? And how can you kind of manage it? Devrol, do you want to take this one?
When you are planting in the summers, you are going to get a lot of cutworms. So I've experienced grasshoppers in the summers, and I have experienced mites. How do you get all of this? Is because of a lot of rain, and so the fungus somehow create other insects, to come and bite on your crop, especially the leaves. With that being said, managing it, I would say that after rain, a day or two, just leave it and do not put any insecticide or fungicide. Only on the third day, that's when you can put in your fungicide as well as your insecticide. Then always leave every single week on the time that you have sprayed your insecticide is how you're going to control it until again probably have a heavy rain or some climate change decided to bring more insects that you don't even know. But the most important one that sometimes can cause a problem is your cutworms. The cutworms somehow find their way to your leaves and the mites eat your bulbs. It's also very important that how you prepare your land before you even transplant. It's how you prepare your land for your beetroot. It's also very important that you put in the specific granular fertilizer called 24622 in order for mites or whatever. Some people do find rodents in their garden for some reason and you eat the beetroot and shame no harvest. But now, every week, put in your insecticide just for controlling of it. You're not necessarily going to remove everything, but just to control it and everything else.
Thank you so much, Devrol. KG, maybe your comment, and then I'm going to ask just one last question before we wrap up.
I'm planting under shaded nets. The most I experienced was grasshoppers, and my yard is full of moles. So I had to put in measures to make sure that the moles don't go into my garden because they were going to eat my beetroot from the bottom. I had to make sure that the barricade within the shaded nets from the outside prevents the moles to dig towards the fields. And like Devrol has said, the preparation of the soil, whereby you make sure that you're fertilizing of the soil before planting, it's a good fertilizer that will help you with pesticides. And I never really experienced a lot of pests besides grasshopper and the fungus because of heavy rains. That's what most of the diseases that I get in my fields, because of the moisture from a lot of rains that we experienced, especially early this year. I'm not sure now with the climate change what's gonna come, because it also affects the pest that we get.
Yeah, you can take the floor, Devrol.
Because of you cannot really control the heavy rains as well as the climate change. You never know what you will find tomorrow. And so with the moist and the up and down of weather conditions, you really have to see whether what's really going on in your field, and therefore you can know what to spray on your field.
Thanks, Devrol. I just wanted to touch on markets, maybe just where you guys market your product to, and what does the market look like for this crop specifically?
For me, I'm still in the informal market. I haven't done the big markets yet. My market has been so good because every week I would supply to my two guys who've got their own small vegetable stalls, the corner street. I supply to my colleagues, to my friends, weekend crop box type of. So that's how I've been selling my crops. I haven't done formal markets yet.
Thanks, KG. Last question I forgot about, guys. It's the harvesting, because as I understand it, the soil must be a little bit moist before cutting or pulling the beets. Is this the best advice when harvesting the specific crop?
Yes, my kind of soil is a bit hard. It gets a bit hard when it's dry. So that is why I have to continuously putting water on the soil. So for me, harvesting while it's a bit wet, maybe if I harvest, I will harvest in the afternoon while I watered in the morning. Well, not when it's too wet, but for me, harvesting when it's a bit wettish, it becomes easier.
Thanks, KG. Devrol, just your last comment on harvesting and maybe storage, and then your markets.
When I do harvest, same as KG, much more advisable to harvest in the mornings while it's quite moist. And well, it's much more easier because when you have to wash it down, it becomes also easier. It does get a lot of dirt when you do wash it down. You just want to make sure that you prepare the harvest as well, so that it can be a very good one with the leaves as well as cutting down the roots as well. With the market, like I mentioned in the beginning, because I crop rotate my beetroot. So usually what I do, because of the produce of the beetroot and how my beetroot actually, the quality that I usually bring out to my customers, usually what I would do, I would let them know, especially there's a shop called Phrases. It's a retailer here in Bronkhorstspruit. And then I also have Pick and Pay where I send out my produce. With them, it's more of a contact, so that when I'm ready, then I will take it to you. I'll sell it to my Pick and Pays in Amsterdam and Phrases. Pick and Pay in Bronkhorstspruit and Phrases in Bronkhorstspruit. So both are my retailers. And so the rest, it does go to the markets in Witbank Market. And so that's how it ends. And then storage, I don't think it's advisable to store it. I've never stored it before, but what I could say that keep it in a cool place. It mustn't be moist. It should be cold. If you don't have a storage, rather put it somewhere where there's a breeze, where there's wind, somewhere outside, or it could be indoors. But advisable to put it inside where it's very cool and there's a breeze. And I think therefore you'd have a good harvest and send it over to the markets. But I think your local markets are actually quite big, especially for beetroot.
Thanks so much, Devrol. Thanks so much to my speakers who joined me this evening. We are at the end of our session, and I'm so happy to have been able to talk to you guys. Edward, I just wanted to maybe just give one last word to you, maybe just to talk more about, the agro-processing space, and maybe just a word of encouragement to people who's in primary agriculture who has not really yet considered moving down along the value chain.
My advice to all the farmers will be, what they're supposed to do, they must think of what they can produce with their produced. Remember, when you're into farming, you must also be able to produce something of what out of what you're farming. There will be a time whereby you may, let's say you have planted, but then when coming to the harvest time, you don't even have a market, but then you have to produce, they are ready to go to the market, but there is no market. then what are you going to do? You cannot throw away everything. Meaning you must have plan B. The plan B might be, or you must have a product in mind that you're going to produce with what you have already have, because you cannot throw away those beetroots. Let's say, for instance, you have something like 1 ton beetroot and you're trying to take it to the market, but the market is not responding very well. So you'll end up decreasing the price. At the end of the day, you end up having a product that is not fresh. And for you to throw it away is going to be a waste. So it's much better, farmers, sometimes just try to find out what you can produce. I know you're not agro processors, but just try to have a product that you can produce out of your beetroot. You can do a lot of things. When we talk about innovation is it's all about producing what you can just think of. You can think of something like beetroot, a skincare product using your beetroot and so forth. Remember, when you make a product, at first you must produce what your mind tells you. If your mind tells you to crush everything and mix with whatever you can think of, do it. Then take it to the laboratory. That is where it is going to be developed. They will tell you, no, you're not supposed to add this, but you can add this and this and that. Remember, there is no way in which they can say whatever you're doing is wrong, but they can simply say you can add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You will end up having the skincare product made out of your beetroot. So just try to think out of the box and see what you can produce with your beetroot, because I know there will be a time and day whereby you're going to struggle with the market. But if you have something alternatively, that is the only way you're going to survive. Keep up the good work. Keep on farming. We as the agro processors, we are listening and we are thinking of, okay, here is a gap. I can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then life goes on.
Thank you so much, Edward. I love your energy and I love having you in the space. I'm definitely invite you back when we focus on other aspects of agro processing, and maybe a good topic would be yogurts. So maybe I'll invite you back to that because you're very creative in that space. We are at the end of tonight's discussion. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for contributing, asking questions, and engaging with me on hashtag Gather to Grow, here on Food for Mzansi's Twitter Spaces. From me, Donumdu, have a good rest of the evening and happy farming, and have a great rest of the week. Bye.